The courthouse in Prescott, Arizona territory stank of tobacco juice and broken dreams. October wind rattled the windows, carrying dust from the street where horses stood hip-shot in the afternoon sun. The year was 1882, and the West was running out of places for old men to die in peace. Caleb Stone sat in the back row of the auction room, his weathered hands folded over the brass head of a walking stick he didn't need. At 68, his back was still straight as a rifle barrel, his gray eyes sharp enough to count the chambers in a man's gun from across a saloon. 25 years as a U.S. Marshal had carved deep lines into his face, each one a story he'd rather forget. Lot number 7, the auctioneer announced, his voice cracking like leather in the heat. The Willow Creek Ranch, 400 acres of prime grazing land, water rights included. We'll start the bidding at $500. Silence fell over the room like a shroud. Men who'd been eager for the previous lots suddenly found fascinating patterns in the floorboards. A woman in the second row clutched her husband's arm, whispering something that made him shake his head violently. Jacob Werner, the seller, stood beside the podium, sweating through his Sunday shirt despite the October chill. His eyes darted from face to face, pleading silently for anyone to bid. $400, the auctioneer tried his confidence, wilting. Surely someone will give me 400 for 400 acres. More silence. A man coughed. Someone's chair creaked as they shifted uncomfortably. 300. Werner's hands trembled as he pulled out a handkerchief to wipe his brow. The auctioneer looked at him with a mixture of pity and annoyance. $200, gentlemen. That's 50 cents an acre. You won't find 100, a voice called from the middle of the room. Everyone turned to look at a well-dressed man with silver hair and a merchant's soft hands. Werner's face lit up with desperate hope, but before the auctioneer could speak, the bidder stood abruptly. My apologies, I've just remembered a prior engagement. He left so quickly his coattails flapped behind him like wings. The auctioneer's gavel hung in the air, uncertain. Do I have any bids? Any bids at all? Caleb studied Werner's face, reading the desperation there like a wanted poster. The man wasn't just eager to sell, he was terrified not to. Interesting. $50, the auctioneer asked, his voice now barely above a whisper. Caleb raised his hand slowly, deliberately. $35. Him. Every head in the room swiveled toward him. Werner's relief was so palpable, it seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. $35 from the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer said quickly, as if afraid Caleb might change his mind. Going once, going twice, sold. The gavel came down with the finality of a judge's death sentence. As Caleb made his way to the desk to sign the papers, a large man with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw and stepped into his path. The man smelled of gunpowder and bad whiskey. You just bought yourself a grave old man, he said, his voice low enough that only Caleb could hear. That ranch is cursed. Everyone who's owned it in the last 5 years is dead. Caleb met his gaze steadily. Then I reckon it found the right owner. I've been dead inside for 5 years already. The scarred man studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Your funeral, Marshal Stone? Caleb didn't react to the use of his former title, though he noted it. Someone had done their homework. He continued to the desk where Werner waited with shaking hands. The deed, Werner said, sliding the papers across the desk so fast they nearly flew off the other side. Just sign here and here and here. Caleb signed it methodically, reading each line despite Werner's obvious anxiety to be done with it. When he handed over $35 in mixed coins and bills, Werner counted it twice as if unable to believe such a small sum could free him from whatever burden he carried. God help you, Werner whispered as he handed over the key. God help your soul. God gave up on me a long time ago, Caleb replied, pocketing the key. About the same time I gave up on him. Werner's face went pale. Mr. Stone, there's something you should... He stopped, glancing around nervously. No, it's done. The land is yours. May you find what you're looking for. And what is it you think I'm looking for, Mr. Werner? Death, Mr. Stone. You have the look of a man seeking death. Well, you found the right place for it. Caleb walked out of the courthouse into the harsh afternoon light, aware of the eyes following him from the windows. The weight of the key in his pocket felt heavier than the Colt 45 on his hip, the same Colt his son Thomas had carried until the day he died. As he untied his horse, a gray gelding as old and stubborn as himself, Caleb allowed himself a bitter smile. $35 for 400 acres. Either he'd just made the deal of the century, or he'd bought the most expensive funeral plot in Arizona territory. The road to Willow Creek Ranch wound through 20 miles of desert that looked like God's own furnace. Saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised in permanent surrender to the sun. Caleb rode steady, his body moving with the horse's gait, in the unconscious rhythm of a man who'd spent more nights in the saddle than in a bed. His mind drifted as it always did on long rides to Margaret and Emily. Margaret, with her corn silk hair that caught the light like spun gold, who'd married him, despite her father's protests that a lawman's wife would spend more time with worry than with her husband. 23 years they'd had together. 23 years of her waiting by the window, keeping his supper warm, patching bullet holes in his clothes and his flesh with equal skill. She'd never complained, not once, not even when the consumption started eating her from the inside out. You gave me more life in 23 years than most women get in 70. She'd whispered near the end, her voice barely a flutter against his ear. Don't you dare blame yourself for this, Caleb Stone. But he had anyway. If he'd been there more, if he'd noticed the signs earlier, if he'd taken her to that sanitarium in Colorado like the doc suggested, instead of chasing the Garrison brothers. Emily had been the one to send word about her mother. His sweet, level-headed Emily, who'd inherited her mother's beauty and her father's iron spine. The telegram had been brief. Mother very ill. Come home, Emily. By the time he'd brought the Garrison brothers back, one alive, one draped over his saddle, both Margaret and Emily were dead. The neighbors had found them 3 days after the attack. Margaret in the bedroom, shot once through the heart. A mercy, they'd said, given what had happened to Emily. His daughter had been found in the barn, and even now, 5 years later, Caleb couldn't let his mind dwell on the details of what those animals had done to her before they'd ended her suffering. Apache raiders, everyone said, led by a half-breed named Joaquin Vasquez, who'd been terrorizing homesteads along the border. The army had been hunting him, the rangers had been hunting him, and for 5 years after that night, Caleb had been hunting him. But Vasquez was like smoke in the wind, always one step ahead, always vanishing just before Caleb arrived. There'd been sightings, rumors, tales told by frightened settlers and tight-lipped Apaches, but never the man himself. Until 6 months ago, when the trail had simply ended. No more raids attributed to Vasquez, no more sightings. It was as if he'd vanished from the earth entirely. Caleb had kept searching for another month before finally accepting what his tired bones had been telling him for years: it was time to stop. That's when he'd heard about the auction in Prescott, a ranch selling for practically nothing, the owner desperate to be rid of it. It had seemed like a sign, if Caleb still believed in such things. A place to stop running, stop searching, stop living. A place to wait for death to finally catch up with him. The sun was sliding toward the horizon when he finally saw the fence line of Willow Creek Ranch. Even from a distance, he could tell the place had been abandoned in a hurry. Gates hung open, banging in the wind with a rhythm like a funeral drum. A wagon sat overturned beside what had once been a garden, its wheels pointing at the sky like dead legs. Caleb stopped his horse at the rusted gate, studying the lay of the land with a lawman's careful eye. The main house squatted against a rise of red rock, built smart to catch morning shade and evening breeze. Adobe walls thick enough to stop bullets, windows positioned to cover all approaches. Whoever had built this place had known about defense. The barn stood off to the left, its door open like a mouth frozen in a scream. Dark stains on the ground near the entrance. Could have been oil, could have been rust, could have been blood. To the right, a windmill turned lazy circles, its blades catching the dying light and throwing shadows that danced like ghosts across the yard. And behind the house, just visible in the golden hour light, 3 figures hung from a beam. Caleb's hand went to his gun before his brain fully processed what he was seeing. He'd witnessed enough lynchings to recognize the silhouettes, the way bodies hung when life had left them. But something was off. The wind moved their clothing, their hair, but one of them moved. Not the movement of wind on dead weight, but the deliberate, desperate motion of someone trying to ease the pressure on their throat. Jesus Christ, Caleb breathed, spurring his horse forward. He galloped through the gate, across the yard littered with broken furniture and scattered belongings, around the house to where a rough wooden frame had been erected, the kind used for butchering cattle or hanging game. 3 women hung from ropes, but these weren't neck-breaking nooses. The ropes were tied under their arms, adjusted so their toes could just touch the wooden boxes beneath them, enough to breathe if they stood on tiptoe, but not enough to rest. It was torture refined to an art designed to kill slowly over days. They were Apache, all three of them, though their traditional dresses were torn and stained with blood, and worse. The oldest looked to be in her mid-30s, her face swollen from beatings, but her eyes, when they flickered open at his approach, still fierce with defiance. The second woman, perhaps 30, had cigarette burns covering her arms, the wounds fresh enough to still weep clear fluid. The youngest, barely more than a girl, maybe 18, hung limp, her strength nearly gone. Caleb swung down from his horse before it had fully stopped pulling his knife as he ran. He cut the youngest down, first catching her as she fell. She weighed nothing like a bird built of bones and air. He laid her gently on the ground and moved to the second woman, then the third, working with the efficient speed of a man who'd cut down hanged men before, though usually they were already dead. The oldest woman's eyes followed him as he worked, and when he cut her down, she managed to remain standing for a moment before her knees buckled. As he caught her, she whispered something that made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Joaquin Vasquez killed your family for Torrens. The name hit him like a physical blow. Samuel Torrens, the richest man in 3 counties who owned more land than some eastern states, who had judges and sheriffs and even army officers in his pocket. What did you say? Caleb demanded. But the woman had passed out, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion and pain. He carried them one by one into the house, the youngest first, because she seemed closest to death. The interior had been ransacked but was structurally sound. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied, but the walls stood firm and the roof was intact. He found blankets in an overturned trunk, their wool rough but clean. A medical kit, surprisingly intact, had been kicked under what remained of the kitchen table. The cistern still held water, and after testing it carefully, a lawman's habit that had saved his life more than once, he began the slow work of bringing the women back from death's threshold. He heated water on the stove, which still functioned despite the destruction around it. He cleaned wounds with the gentleness he'd once used when Emily was small, and would come to him with scraped knees and splinters. The youngest girl's breathing was shallow, labored. Her pulse fluttered under his fingers like a dying moth. He got water into her, a few drops at a time, remembering how Margaret had done the same for him once, when fever had nearly killed him. The woman with the burned arms moaned as he cleaned the wounds but didn't wake. Infection was already setting in. He could smell it, sweet and wrong. He used what whiskey he had in his saddlebags to clean the worst of it, knowing it wasn't enough, knowing she'd need a real doctor if she was going to survive. As he worked, the oldest woman regained consciousness. She watched him with those fierce, dark eyes, saying nothing as he tended to the others. When he finally turned his attention to her injuries, cracked ribs from the beatings, rope burns under her arms, what looked like knife cuts on her shoulders, she spoke. I am Rosa Vasquez. She said, her voice stronger than it had any right to be. These are Maria Vasquez and Anna Vasquez. We are the widow, sister, and daughter of the man you have hunted for 5 years. Caleb's hands stilled on the bandage he was wrapping. Joaquin Vasquez's family. What remains of it? Rosa's laugh was bitter as alkali water. He is 6 months dead, Marshall Stone, poisoned by Samuel Torrens when he refused to kill more innocents. You're lying. The words came out harsher than he intended. Vasquez was seen where Torrens wanted him seen. My husband was many things, Marshall Stone. A killer, yes. A thief, certainly. But even he had lines he would not cross. When Torrens ordered him to massacre a wagon train of settlers, families with children, Joaquin refused. So Torrens poisoned him at what was supposed to be a peace meeting, then spread stories of Vasquez raids to cover his own men's crimes. Caleb studied her face, looking for the telltale signs of deception he'd learned to spot over 25 years of interrogating criminals. He found only pain and exhaustion and a terrible sincerity. You're saying Torrens ordered the attack on my family. I'm saying more than that. Rosa struggled to sit up, her face gray with pain, but her voice steady. I'm saying your family died because you were investigating Torrens's gun-running operation. 3 weeks before the attack, you arrested 2 of his men moving rifles to the Comancheros. Do you remember? Caleb remembered. Pete Lawson and Jake Turnbull, caught with a wagon full of army rifles supposedly bound for Fort Huachuca. They'd claimed they were just hired drivers, didn't know what was in the crates. Caleb had believed them, had let them go with a warning while he investigated further up the chain. Torrens couldn't risk you connecting those rifles to him, Rosa continued, so he sent Joaquin to kill you. Only you weren't home. Your family was. The words hit Caleb like physical blows. Each one a truth he didn't want to hear, couldn't afford to believe, yet rang with the clarity of church bells. If this is true, he said slowly, why should I not kill you where you sit? You're his widow. You benefited from his crimes. Rosa met his gaze without flinching. Because we are the only ones who can prove it. Joaquin kept records, dates, payments, orders from Torrens. All written in Torrens's own hand because he was too arrogant to believe a half-breed Apache could read and write well enough to be a threat. Where are these records? Hidden. And they'll stay hidden until we have a guarantee of protection. Rosa glanced at the two younger women, both unconscious, but breathing steadier now. We've been Torrens's prisoners for 6 months, kept alive only because he believes we know where Joaquin hid a fortune in gold from his raids. He was losing patience. Another day, maybe two, and we would have been dead. Outside, the wind picked up, sending dust devils dancing across the yard. Then cutting through the wind came the sound of horses. Many horses moving fast. Anna's eyes snapped open, wild with terror. They're coming, she whispered. They always come at night. They always... Shh, Caleb said, moving to the window. Through a crack in the boards someone had nailed up, he could see riders approaching. 12 of them moving with the easy confidence of men who expected no resistance. The leader was unmistakable, the same scarred man from the auction. But now Caleb could see him clearly in the dying light, and recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. Jack Butcher McKenna. He'd ridden with Quantrill during the war, been at Lawrence when they'd murdered over 150 men and boys. After the war, he'd turned mercenary, selling his gun and his complete lack of conscience to the highest bidder. That's McKenna, Maria said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was cultured, educated. Torrens' chief enforcer. He's the one who... She stopped, her hand going to the burns on her arms. How many guns do you have? Rosa asked. My Colt, a Winchester in my saddle, and whatever's in this house. There's a hidden compartment under the floorboards in the main bedroom, Rosa said. Joaquin kept weapons there. Caleb found it quickly, a professional job that would have been invisible if you didn't know where to look. Inside were 2 rifles, a shotgun, 3 pistols, and enough ammunition to stand off a small army. When he returned, Rosa had managed to stand. She picked up one of the rifles with practiced ease. I was Apache before I was Vasquez's wife. I know how to fight. Maria took a pistol, checking the cylinder with professional skill. I worked the mining camps before Joaquin married Rosa. I've defended myself before. Even Anna, young as she was, reached for a weapon. They killed my father, she said simply. Blood demands blood. McKenna's voice carried across the yard. Hello, the house, Stone. We know you're in there. Saw you right in. This doesn't have to be difficult. Caleb moved to the door, speaking through it. McKenna, you're trespassing on private property. Now that's where you're wrong, Stone. See, Mr. Torrens holds the note on this property. Has since the last owner borrowed money and couldn't pay it back. That makes us debt collectors all legal-like. I bought this land free and clear at public auction. Any debt died with the previous owner. McKenna laughed. You really think the law matters out here? You've been away from the badge too long, old man. Out here, Mr. Torrens is the law. Then I guess we've got a problem. No problem at all. Send out those 3 Apache whores and we'll be on our schwein. Hell, Mr. Torrens might even buy the land from you, give you enough to drink yourself to death in comfort. That's what you want, isn't it? To join your pretty wife and daughter. The casual cruelty of the words, the easy knowledge of his loss told Caleb everything he needed to know. There would be no negotiating, no walking away. Torrens had sent these men to clean up loose ends, and that now included him. McKenna, he called out, you've got one chance to ride away. Take it, or what you'll arrest us, the laughter from multiple throats now. You're not a marshal anymore, Stone. You're just a broken-down old man who couldn't protect his family then and can't protect those savages now. Caleb looked at the 3 women beaten, tortured, half dead from their ordeal, standing ready to fight. He thought of Margaret and Emily, who'd had no chance to defend themselves. You're right, he called back. I'm not a marshal anymore, which means I don't have to bring you in alive. The first shot shattered the window, showering them with glass. Then the night exploded with gunfire, and Caleb Stone's war for redemption began. The gunfire came in waves like thunder rolling across the desert. Windows shattered, sending glass skittering across the floor. like diamonds scattered by a careless hand. Caleb pushed Rosa down behind an overturned table, then grabbed Anna and Maria, pulling them into cover. "Stay down." He shouted over the din, but Rosa was already moving, crawling toward a window with the rifle clutched in her hands. "They're trying to flank us," she called out, peering through a bullet hole in the wall. "Three men moving toward the barn." Caleb admired her tactical sense even as he worried about her exposure. He'd seen too many people die because they thought they were bulletproof in the heat of battle. But Rosa moved like someone who'd been under fire before, keeping low, never staying in one spot too long. The initial barrage slowed, then stopped. In the sudden silence, Caleb could hear his own heartbeat, the labored breathing of the wounded women, the creak of boot leather outside. "Stone," McKenna's voice carried clearly. "That was just a greeting. We can keep this up all night. Those walls won't stop bullets forever." Caleb moved to a window, careful to stay out of direct sight. The moon had risen, painting the yard in silver and shadow. He could see the riders had dismounted, taking cover behind water troughs, the overturned wagon, anything that would stop a bullet. "Maria," he said quietly, "can you still shoot?" The woman nodded, though her face was pale with pain. "I can shoot better than I can stand marshal." "I'm not a marshal anymore. Just Caleb will do." He handed her one of the pistols from Joaquin's cache. "Watch the back door. They will try to come through there eventually." "What about me?" Anna asked. The girl was trying to sound brave, but Caleb could see her hands shaking. "You're our loader," he said, giving her a job that would keep her busy without putting her in direct line of fire. "Keep the weapons loaded and ready. Can you do that?" She nodded eagerly, grateful for a purpose. A rifle cracked from outside and a bullet punched through the wall, inches from Caleb's head. He dropped and rolled, came up firing through the window. His shot caught one of McKenna's men in the shoulder, spinning him around before he dropped behind cover. "Good shot for an old man," Rosa commented, squeezing off 2 quick shots of her own. A yelp from outside suggested at least one had found its mark. "I've had practice," Caleb replied, remembering the countless hours he'd spent at the range after Margaret and Emily died, imagining Vasquez's face on every target. The firefight settled into a rhythm, periods of intense shooting, followed by tense silence. McKenna's men were good professional, but they weren't expecting this level of resistance. They'd come to collect 3 tortured women and 1 old man. Instead, they'd found a fortress with defenders who knew how to fight. During one of the lulls, Maria called out softly, "Movement at the back." Caleb moved quickly through the house, reaching the kitchen, just as the back door exploded inward. 2 men rushed through, guns raised. Maria shot the first one center mass, the heavy caliber pistol booming in the enclosed space. Caleb took the second with 2 quick shots, watching the man crumple like a puppet with cut strings. "Push them out," he ordered, and together they dragged the bodies outside and barricaded the door with a kitchen table and chairs. It wouldn't stop determined men, but it would slow them down, make noise. When they returned to the main room, Rosa had a grim smile on her face. "They're pulling back. I count 3 down, maybe 4. Through the window, Caleb could see the riders retreating beyond rifle range. They'd learned their first lesson. This wouldn't be easy. "They'll be back," he said. "McKenna doesn't give up." "Neither do Apache women," Rosa replied, checking her rifle's action. "We've been fighting to survive for 6 months. We can fight a little longer." Anna had done well keeping the weapons loaded despite her terror. Now she sat against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "I want to be brave," she whispered, "like my father was." "Your father?" Caleb asked gently. "Not Joaquin," she said. "My real father. He died when I was young, but Joaquin raised me as his own." Rosa put a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Your father was Harold Bennett, a good man, a fair judge, one of the few who treated Apache and Mexican fairly in his court." The name hit Caleb like cold water. Judge Bennett. "He was killed 5 years ago. They said it was—" He trailed off, the pieces clicking together in his mind. "They said it was Apache raiders," Rosa finished. "Everything Torrens does, he blames on Apache. We're convenient scapegoats. Who's going to believe us over a wealthy white landowner?" Before Caleb could respond, a new sound cut through the night, the crackling of fire. Orange light flickered through the windows. "The barn," Maria said, looking out. "They've set the barn on fire." The old structure went up like it had been soaked in kerosene flames, leaping 30 feet into the air. The light turned night into hellish day, eliminating the shadows the defenders had been using for cover. "That's just the beginning," Caleb said. "They'll try to burn us out." As if to confirm his words, flaming arrows began arcing through the air, thudding into the walls and roof of the house. Most went out quickly, the adobe walls wouldn't burn easily, but some found purchase in the wooden window frames and doors. Water, Rosa commanded, and Anna ran to fetch buckets from the cistern. They worked frantically, dousing flames before they could spread, but it was exhausting work, and they were already tired. Through the chaos, Caleb heard something that made his blood run cold, the sound of a wagon approaching, wheels creaking under a heavy load. "Get down," he shouted just as the world exploded. The dynamite blast shook the house to its foundations. Part of the east wall collapsed, adobe bricks tumbling inward in a cloud of dust and debris. Maria screamed as a beam fell across her legs, pinning her. Caleb and Rosa rushed to lift the beam, straining against its weight. Anna pulled Maria free just as more gunfire erupted through the new opening in the wall. "Fall back to the bedrooms," Caleb ordered, laying down covering fire as the women retreated deeper into the house. They barricaded themselves in the main bedroom, using the bed and dresser to block the door. Maria was barely conscious, her legs badly injured. Rosa worked to bind them, while Caleb and Anna watched the door and window. "We can't hold them," Anna said, her young voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "There are too many." She was right. Caleb had maybe 20 rounds left for his rifle, another dozen for his Colt. The women were in similar straits. McKenna's men would wait for dawn, then storm the house. It would be over in minutes. "There's something else," Rosa said quietly, finishing with Maria's bandages. "Something I haven't told you." Caleb looked at her, seeing something new in her eyes. Not fear, but calculation. "Joaquin didn't hide gold," she said. "He hid evidence. Enough to destroy Torrens completely. Letters, contracts, records of bribes to judges and army officers. Even correspondence with Confederate agents during the war, treason that would see him hanged." "Where?" Caleb asked. "That's the problem. He hid it in 3 parts, told each of us the location of one part. He said if anything happened to him, we should trade the information for our lives. But—" She gestured to Maria, unconscious now, and Anna, so young and frightened. "We need all 3 of us alive to find it all." The hours until dawn stretched like taffy, each minute an eternity of waiting and watching. McKenna's men had pulled back after the dynamite blast content to wait for sunrise to finish the job. Occasionally a rifle would crack, a bullet would punch through wall or window, just to remind the defenders they were still there. Caleb used the time to fortify their position as best he could. He dragged furniture against the walls, creating additional barriers. He distributed their remaining ammunition, making sure each weapon was loaded and ready. But mostly he listened to Rosa talk. "I met Joaquin when I was 17, she said, her voice soft in the darkness. "My village had been attacked by scalp hunters, Americans, who were paid $50 for each Apache scalp by the Mexican government. My parents were dead, my brothers killed trying to defend us. Joaquin found me hiding in a burned-out mission." She paused, lost in memory. "He was already an outlaw then, but he was kind to me, gentle. He could have taken what he wanted, but instead he offered me protection, asked nothing in return, except that I teach him to read and write better. His mother had been Apache, but he'd been raised by his Mexican father, never fully accepted by either people." "And you fell in love," Caleb said, not a question. "Eventually. It took 2 years before I trusted him enough for that. By then I'd seen who he really was, not the monster the newspapers described, but a man trying to survive in a world that wanted him dead just for existing." "He killed innocent people," Caleb pointed out, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Yes," Rosa agreed simply. "He did terrible things. I won't make excuses for him, but I will say this, he never killed women or children if he could avoid it. That was his one rule, the line he wouldn't cross. When Torrens ordered him to attack that wagon train full of families, Joaquin refused. That's when Torrens decided he was more trouble than he was worth." Anna stirred from where she'd been dozing fitfully. "Tell him about the water," she said. Rosa nodded. "Torrens's real interest isn't just land or gold. It's water. There's an underground river that runs beneath this whole region. The Apache have known about it for generations, but we kept it secret. Torrens found out somehow, probably tortured it out of someone, and now he wants to control it all. With that water, he could turn this desert into an empire," Caleb mused. "Charge whatever he wants for access. Or deny it to anyone who opposes him," Rosa added. "He's already done it to several small ranchers, dried up their wells, forced them to sell or die of thirst." A sound outside made them all freeze, footsteps on the porch slow and deliberate. Then a voice, but not McKenna's. This one was younger cultured with a trace of Eastern education. Mr. Stone, my name is Thomas Morrison. I'm here to help. Caleb and Rosa exchanged glances. It could be a trick, but something about the voice seemed genuine. How do I know you're not one of Torrens's men? Caleb called back. Because Torrens's men wouldn't mention that you saved my father's life in Tucson 8 years ago. Tom Morrison, you pulled him out of a burning building after the Hackett gang robbed the bank. Caleb remembered. Morrison had been a bank manager, a good man who'd refused to open the safe. The Hackett gang had set the building on fire with him inside. Caleb had barely gotten him out alive. If you're really Tom Morrison's son, what did your father always carry in his pocket? A laugh from outside, a silver dollar from 1841, the year he was born. He said it was his lucky piece. Caleb relaxed slightly. Only Tom Morrison and his family would know that detail. What are you doing here, son? My father heard you were in trouble. He's too old to ride hard anymore, but he sent me and my brothers. We're camped about a mile out with 8 men. We can't take on McKenna directly, but we can even the odds a bit. McKenna will kill you all, Rosa warned. Maybe, Thomas agreed. But my father says a debt is a debt. Besides, we're not the only ones who have a problem with Torrens. Half the county would rise against him if someone gave them a reason. Before Caleb could respond, gunfire erupted from the direction McKenna's men had taken cover. Not the sporadic shooting from before, but a sustained firefight. Shouts and curses filled the air, along with the thunder of horses. That would be my brother, Thomas called out cheerfully. We figured a little night raid might thin their numbers. I'd suggest you folks get ready to move. This is your best chance to get out. Caleb looked at the women. Maria was conscious but couldn't walk. Anna was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline. Rosa met his gaze steadily. We can't run, she said. Maria won't make it, and they'll hunt us down anyway. Our only chance is to ford up somewhere defensible and wait for help. The mission, Anna said suddenly. The old San Felipe mission, 5 miles north. It's built like a fortress, and there's water there. Caleb knew the place abandoned for 20 years, but the walls were 3 feet thick and 20 feet high. If they could get there, they could hold out indefinitely. Can you ride? He asked Maria. She nodded weakly. Tie me to the saddle if you have to. The fighting outside intensified. Through the window, Caleb could see muzzle flashing, men running, horses rearing. The Morrison boys had caught McKenna's men completely off guard. Now or never, he decided. Rosa, help me with Maria. Anna, gather the weapons and ammunition. They moved quickly, half carrying Maria through the ruined house. Outside, chaos reigned. The barn's dying flames cast wild shadows as men fought running battles between the buildings. Caleb saw one of McKenna's men go down with an arrow in his back. Apparently, the Morrisons had brought some Apache allies. Their horses were miraculously untouched in a small corral behind the house. Caleb saddled them quickly while Rosa stood guard. They lifted Maria onto one horse, tying her in place as gently as possible. Anna took another Rosa III. Caleb mounted his gray, the Winchester, across his saddle. The mission, he said. Ride hard and don't stop for anything. They burst from cover at full gallop, racing through the battle like ghosts. Someone shouted a rifle cracked, but the darkness and confusion worked in their favor. In moments, they were beyond the firefight, thundering across the desert toward the black bulk of the mountains. Behind them, the shooting continued, but Caleb could hear something else now. McKenna's voice raised in fury, screaming orders. He'd realized his prey had escaped. The San Felipe mission rose from the desert like a vision from the past, its bell tower stretching toward the stars. Adobe walls, weathered but solid, enclosed a courtyard and chapel. The massive wooden gates stood open, hanging crooked on ancient hinges. They rode through just as the eastern sky began to lighten exhaustion, weighing on them like lead cloaks. Maria was barely conscious, held in the saddle only by the ropes. Anna swayed dangerously, and even Rosa's iron will was clearly flagging. Caleb helped them into the chapel, which was in the best condition. The roof was mostly intact, and the thick walls would provide excellent protection. A well in the courtyard still held water, brackish but drinkable. As he was settling Maria on a makeshift bed of old tapestries, Thomas Morrison rode through the gates with 3 other men. The young man, he couldn't be more than 25, had his father's honest face and steady manner. We bought you some time, he reported, dismounting. McKenna lost 6 men, maybe 7, but he's regrouping. He'll be here within the hour. Your men. 2 wounded, but they'll live. The rest are falling back by a different route going to town to raise help. Thomas looked around the mission. This is a good spot. We can hold here. Caleb studied the young man. This isn't your fight, son. It is now. Thomas's jaw set stubbornly. Torrance has been squeezing everyone for years. My father says it's time someone stood up to him. Besides, he glanced at Anna, who, despite her exhaustion, was quite pretty. Some fights are worth joining. Rosa noticed the look, and despite everything, smiled slightly. Careful, young man. That one has claws. I bite too, Anna added, but there was a tiny smile on her face as well. They spent the next 30 minutes preparing for siege. The mission's walls were strong, but there were too many points of entry to defend them all. They barricaded what they could, set up firing positions, distributed weapons. Thomas had brought additional ammunition and, more importantly, food and medical supplies. He tended to Maria with surprising skill. Studied medicine for a year back east, he explained when Rosa expressed surprise. Decided I liked ranching better, but I remember the basics. Why would a rancher's son study medicine? Anna asked. My mother died of fever when I was 12, Thomas replied quietly. The nearest doctor was 50 miles away. I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. The sun was fully up when McKenna arrived, but instead of the dozen men he'd started with, he had over 30 riders, reinforcements from Torrance's other operations. They surrounded the mission at a respectful distance, well out of rifle range. McKenna himself rode forward under a white flag. Stone, he called out, you've led us a merry chase, but it's over. I've got 30 men. You've got, 4 or 5, and half of them women. Surrender now, and I promise the women won't be harmed. Your promises aren't worth the breath it takes to speak them, Caleb called back. Maybe not, McKenna agreed. But here's something that is worth considering. Mr. Torrance himself is on his way. He'll be here by noon with another 20 men. 50 men Stone. You can't fight those odds. Watch me, McKenna laughed. You always were a stubborn bastard. Tell you what, I'll give you 1 hour to think it over. After that, we're coming in, and God help anyone who gets in our way. He rode back to his men, and the waiting began. He's right, Thomas said quietly. 50 men is too many. Then we'd better make sure there aren't 50 when they attack, Caleb replied. He looked at Rosa. You said Joaquin hid evidence. What exactly are we talking about? Letters in Torrance's own hand ordering murders, records of bribes, maps showing where he's hidden weapons for sale to hostile Indians, even proof that he arranged for army patrols to be ambushed so he could sell the recovered weapons. That's enough to hang him 10 times over, Thomas breathed. If we can get it to the right authorities, Rosa agreed, but Torrance owns every lawman for 100 miles. Not every lawman, a new voice said from the doorway. They all spun weapons raising to find a man standing in the chapel entrance. He was old, perhaps 70, wearing a long duster over what looked like a U.S. Marshal's badge. James Crawford, he said, holding his hands up peacefully. Federal Marshal out of Denver. I've been tracking Torrance for 2 years, waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to stand up to him. He looked at Caleb. Seems I've found both in one man. How did you get past McKenna's men? Caleb demanded, not lowering his rifle. Crawford smiled. Son, I was sneaking past hostile Indians when McKenna was still pissing his diapers. Besides, I didn't come alone. As if on cue, more men appeared in the courtyard, 5 deputy marshals, all armed, all wearing federal badges. The Morrison boys' message reached the right ears, Crawford explained. We've been waiting for an opportunity like this, but we need that evidence the lady mentioned. Without it, Torrance walks free. Rosa stood slowly, painfully. I'll tell you where my part is hidden, but only if you guarantee protection for all of us, including full pardons for any crimes connected to Joaquin. Crawford nodded. You have my word and the authority of the federal government behind it. Then we'd better hurry, Rosa said, because McKenna won't wait an hour. He never intended to. As if to prove her right, a rifle shot rang out, shattering what remained of a stained glass window. The battle for San Felipe mission had begun. The rifle shot that shattered the stained glass was followed by a volley that sent everyone diving for cover. Colored glass rained down like deadly jewels, carpeting the chapel floor in fragments of saints and angels. So much for that hour, Crawford shouted, pulling his Winchester from its scabbard. Deputies take positions, make them pay for every inch. The federal men spread out with practiced efficiency, but Caleb could see the truth in their faces. 6 marshals, even federal ones, wouldn't be enough against 30 gunmen. They needed a miracle, or at least better odds. McKenna's voice boomed across the courtyard. Crawford should have stayed in Denver, old man. Your jurisdiction means nothing here. Federal warrant trumps local authority, McKenna, Crawford called back. Stand down or face federal charges. McKenna's laughter was his only response, followed by another withering volley of gunfire. The mission's thick walls stopped most bullets, but the attackers were smart. They concentrated fire on the wooden gates, the few windows, any weak point they could find. It was only a matter of time before they broke through. During a lull in the shooting, Thomas Morrison crawled over to Caleb. There's something you should know. I saw Sheriff Bolton riding with McKenna's reinforcements. Caleb wasn't surprised. Bolton had been in Torrance's pocket for years, everyone knew it. But having the sheriff openly side with outlaws changed things. It meant Torrance felt secure enough to drop all pretense of legality. Bolton's got a judge's warrant, Rosa said grimly. I heard McKenna talking about it. Claims we murdered Werner, the man who sold you the ranch. Werner Shaw, Caleb frowned. He was alive when I left Prescott. Not anymore, Crawford said. Found dead this morning, throat cut. Convenient, isn't it? The one man who could testify about the auction. A pattern was emerging in one Caleb had seen before. Torrance was tying up loose ends, eliminating anyone who could testify against him, which meant everyone in this mission was living on borrowed time. Anna had been quiet, but now she spoke up. There's something else, something about my real father, Judge Bennett. Before he died, he told me he'd hidden something important. Said if anything happened to him, I should find the Stone Angel. Stone Angel? Thomas asked. There's one in the mission cemetery, Anna said. A statue marking a child's grave. I never understood what he meant until now. Before anyone could respond, the attacking fire intensified. This time, smoke began seeping through the windows. They were using fire arrows again, trying to smoke the defenders out. We need that evidence, Crawford said urgently. If Torrance gets here with another 20 men, we're finished. Caleb made a decision. Rosa, where's your piece of the evidence? Buried beneath the altar, she said. Joaquin put it there years ago, said God would protect it. Anna, can you show me the Stone Angel? The girl nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. I'll go with her, Thomas volunteered immediately. No, Caleb said. You stay here, help Crawford hold them off. Rosa, you come with us. You know what we're looking for. They slipped out through a side door while Crawford's men laid down covering fire. The cemetery was on the north side of the mission, partially protected by a crumbling wall. Ancient headstones leaned at crazy angles, most of their inscriptions worn away by wind and time. The Stone Angel stood in the far corner, a beautiful piece of work, despite the wear of decades. It marked the grave of Isabella, beloved daughter, 1842-1849. Your father and this child, Caleb asked Anna gently. No, but he presided over her funeral. The family was killed by Apache's real ones, not Torrance's men. My father always said it was the saddest service he ever performed. Rosa was already examining the statue's base. Here, she said, finding a loose stone. Behind it was an oilskin package yellowed with age. Inside were documents that made Caleb whistle low. Letters from Torrance discussing the murder of problematic settlers, including Judge Bennett himself. Bank drafts showing payments to assassins. Most damning, a contract with Confederate agents from 1864 agreeing to supply weapons in exchange for gold treason that would definitely result in hanging. This is it, Caleb said. This is enough to... The crack of a rifle cut him off. Rosa gasped, clutching her shoulder as blood seeped between her fingers. A second shot chipped stone inches from Anna's head. Run, Caleb shouted, returning fire at the muzzle flash he'd seen. They scrambled back toward the mission, Rosa leaning heavily on Anna, Caleb covering their retreat. They burst through the door to find chaos. Crawford was down, blood pooling beneath him. 2 of his deputies were also wounded. Thomas had a gash across his forehead, but was still fighting his rifle, barking steadily. Crawford took 1 in the chest, Thomas reported. He's alive, but barely. Caleb knelt beside the old marshal. Crawford's eyes flickered open, focusing with difficulty. Did you get it? He whispered. We got it, Caleb confirmed. Good. There's something you should know. I wasn't just hunting Torrance. There's a special prosecutor in Tucson, Judge Samuel, Brennan, clean as they come. Military escort, already coming. Should be here by sunset. Hold on, Caleb urged. Help's coming. Crawford managed a weak smile. Too old for holding on. But you finish this stone. Promise me. I promise, Crawford Zarian found his badge, unpinned it with trembling fingers. Take it. You'll need federal authority. I'm not a marshal anymore. You never stopped being one. Crawford's voice was fading. Just got lost for a while. The old man's eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady. He'd said what he needed to say. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning the mission into an oven. The defenders were running low on ammunition, water, and hope. McKenna's men had pulled back after the fierce morning fighting, but everyone knew they were just waiting for Torrance's reinforcements. Maria, despite her injuries, had dragged herself to a window with a rifle. I count 28 still able to fight, she reported, plus however many Torrance brings. We can't hold, one of Crawford's deputies said bluntly. Maybe we should try to negotiate buy time until that military escort arrives. There's no negotiating with Torrance, Rosa said, wincing as Anna bandaged her shoulder. He'll kill us all regardless. Thomas had been quiet, but now he spoke up. There might be another way. My brothers should have reached town by now. If they've raised a citizen's posse, that's a big if, Caleb pointed out. It's the only if we've got, Thomas replied. As they debated, Anna had been studying the documents they'd recovered. Suddenly she gasped. Look at this. She held up a letter dated 5 years ago. Caleb recognized Torrance's handwriting immediately. The stone situation requires immediate resolution, Anna read. The marshal is too close to connecting our operation to the stolen army shipments. Use Vasquez for the wet work, but ensure it appears to be random Apache violence. The marshal must be eliminated before the federal investigation proceeds. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. There it was in black and white. Torrance had ordered his family's murder. There's more, Anna continued. If Vasquez fails or becomes problematic, eliminate him and blame any subsequent actions on his continued depredations. The Apache make convenient scapegoats. He planned it all, Rosa said bitterly. Every death, every raid, all to cover his crimes. A shout from outside interrupted them. Stone, I have a proposition. It wasn't McKenna's voice. This one was cultured smooth as aged whiskey. Caleb peered through a crack in the barricaded door. Samuel Torrance sat a magnificent black stallion just out of rifle range. Even at this distance, Caleb could see he was everything a successful frontier baron should be. Tall, distinguished with silver hair and an expensive suit. He looked like a senator or a bank president, not a mass murderer. I'm listening, Caleb called back. I understand you have certain documents that belong to me. Historical curiosities, really. But I'm sentimental about such things. Return them and I'll pay you $50,000, cash. You can take the women and leave. No one has to die today. Except Werner and Crawford and my family. There was a pause. Then Torrance laughed, a sound like ice breaking. Your family. My dear fellow, your family was killed by Apache raiders. Everyone knows that. I have a letter that says different. Your letter, your handwriting. The laughter stopped. Documents can be forged. No court would accept. A federal court might, Caleb interrupted, especially with Judge Brennan presiding. This time the silence stretched longer. When Torrance spoke again, his voice had lost its polish. You think you're clever, Stone, but you're just a broken-down drunk playing at being a lawman again. Look around you. I have 50 men. In 1 hour, that mission will be rubble and everyone inside will be dead. No one will ever know about those documents. Then why offer me money? Because I'm a businessman. Bloodshed is expensive and messy, but if you insist on being stubborn... Torrance turned his horse. McKenna burned them out. Leave no survivors. As Torrance rode away, McKenna's men began advancing from all sides. But something else caught Caleb's attention, dust on the southern horizon. A lot of dust, like a large group of riders moving fast. Company coming, he announced. Thomas scrambled to look. That's from the direction of town. Could be my brothers with help. Or it could be more of Torrance's men. They wouldn't know until it was too late. The attack began in earnest. This time McKenna's men didn't hold back. They rushed the walls under covering fire, trying to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. Caleb shot 2 men off the wall. Thomas dropped another, but they kept coming. A group managed to break through the main gate. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted in the courtyard. Caleb found himself facing a burly gunman with a knife. They grappled the man's superior strength, slowly overwhelming Caleb's technique. Just as the knife touched his throat, Anna appeared behind the attacker and brought a rifle butt down on his skull. "We're even," she said, helping Caleb up. The fighting was desperate now. Rosa, despite her wound, had grabbed a pistol and was firing steadily. Maria dragged herself along the floor, reloading weapons for the others. Even the wounded deputies were fighting. Then, just when it seemed they'd be overrun, a new sound cut through the battle, a bugle call. A U.S. Army bugle call. The dust cloud resolved into mounted soldiers, a full company of cavalry, charging across the desert. At their head rode a stern-faced major, saber drawn. Behind the military came what looked like half the town's shopkeepers, ranchers, even some of the saloon girls, all armed, all angry. Thomas's brothers had done more than raise a posse. They'd started a revolution. McKenna's men, caught between the mission's defenders and the charging cavalry, broke and ran. Some threw down their weapons and surrendered. Others tried to flee into the desert. McKenna himself stood his ground, emptying his pistols at the oncoming soldiers before a cavalryman's saber cut him down. In minutes it was over. The surviving attackers were disarmed and under guard. The mission courtyard, which had been a battlefield, became a makeshift medical station as people tended to the wounded. Major Harrison of the 6th Cavalry was a no-nonsense officer who'd fought Apaches, Comancheros, and outlaws for 15 years. He took one look at Crawford's badge in Caleb's hand and nodded. "Marshal Crawford sent word 2 days ago that he might need backup. Glad we made it in time." "Crawford's badly wounded," Caleb reported. "Needs immediate medical attention." The major's medic, a competent young man from Philadelphia, immediately took charge of the wounded. His prognosis for Crawford was grim, but not hopeless. "If we can get him to the hospital at Fort Huachuca, he might make it." Sheriff Bolton was among the captured, blustering about his authority and demanding to be released. The major shut him up with a look that could have frozen whiskey. "Sheriff Bolton, you're under military arrest for armed insurrection against federal authority. You'll be tried by a military tribunal." He turned to Caleb. "Now, Marshal Stone, I understand you have evidence regarding Samuel Torrens." Caleb handed over the documents. The major read through them, his face growing darker with each page. "Treason, murder, conspiracy. This man's going to hang 10 times over." He looked up. "Where is Torrens now?" "He rode off when you arrived," Thomas said. "Probably heading for his ranch to destroy any other evidence." "Or to Mexico," Rosa added. "He has connections there, people who owe him favors." The major made a quick decision. "Lieutenant Williams, take 2 squads and secure the Torrens ranch. Sergeant Major, organize pursuit parties. I want Torrens found." As the soldiers dispersed, Anna approached the major. "Sir, there's more evidence hidden. My father was Joaquin Vasquez. He hid records of all Torrens's crimes." The major's eyebrows rose. "Vasquez's daughter, Miss Your Father, was a wanted outlaw who was murdered by Torrens when he refused to kill innocent families," Rosa interjected, stepping forward despite her wound. "My husband was many things, Major, but in the end, he tried to do right." "That's for a court to decide," the major said, but his tone was not unkind. "If you cooperate fully, I'm sure the prosecutor will take that into consideration." Over the next hours, the wounded were treated and the prisoners secured. The full scope of Torrens's crimes began to emerge. Citizens who'd been too frightened to speak before now came forward with stories of extortion, murder, and theft spanning 20 years. "He controlled everything," said Marcus Webb, who owned the general store. "If you didn't pay his protection fees, your shipments got robbed, your store burned down." "He killed my husband," added Mrs. Eleanor Preston, a widow who ran a boarding house. "Said it was Apache, but John never left town. He was murdered because he refused to sell our land." Story after story painted a picture of a reign of terror that had gripped the entire county. Torrens had been judge, jury, and executioner, using his wealth and violence to rule like a medieval baron. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mission, a rider approached under a white flag. It was one of Torrens's men, a nervous-looking accountant named Pemberton. "I have a message from Mr. Torrens," he said, his voice shaking. "He's willing to surrender, but only to Marshal Stone and only if guaranteed safe passage to trial." "He's in no position to make demands," Major Harrison said. "He's fortified at his ranch with 30 men," Pemberton replied. Says he'll fight to the death unless his terms are met. A lot of people will die. Caleb looked at the assembled faces, Rosa still proud despite her pain, Anna young but steeled by loss, Thomas Morrison ready to fight for what was right, Maria wounded but determined. Then he looked at Crawford unconscious but still breathing, the badge heavy in Caleb's pocket. "I'll go," he said. "It's a trap," Thomas protested immediately. "Of course it is," Caleb agreed. "But Torrens is right about one thing, a siege will cost lives. Maybe I can end this without more bloodshed." "You're not going alone," Rosa said firmly. "Or without us," Anna added, Maria nodding agreement despite her injuries. Caleb started to protest and saw the determination in their faces. These women had earned the right to see this through to the end. "Major, can you spare some men for an escort?" "I can do better than that," Harrison replied. "I'll bring the entire company. If Torrens wants to surrender to you, he can do it properly in front of witnesses." As they prepared to ride out, Thomas Morrison pulled Caleb aside. "Mr. Stone, when this is over, that is, I was wondering." He glanced at Anna, who was checking her rifle with practiced ease. Caleb almost smiled. "Son, if you're asking my permission to court her, you'd better ask her. But word of advice, that young woman's been through hell. She needs time to heal, not a suitor." "I can wait," Thomas said simply. "Some things are worth waiting for." They rode out as the moon rose blood red on the horizon. The Torrens Ranch was 10 miles north, a fortress-like compound built with stolen money and slave labor. As they approached, Caleb could see rifle barrels bristling from every window. But something was wrong. No challenges came from the sentries, no shots were fired as they rode up to the main gate. The place was silent as a tomb. Major Harrison held up a hand, stopping the column. "Could be an ambush." Caleb dismounted, studying the ground. "No, look, tracks heading south toward Mexico. A lot of horses moving fast." They entered the compound carefully, weapons ready. The main house was empty, abandoned in haste. Papers were scattered everywhere, some half-burned in the fireplace. A safe stood open, cleaned out. In Torrens' study they found him. Samuel Torrens sat in his leather chair behind his massive oak desk, still wearing his expensive suit. A glass of whiskey sat untouched at his elbow. He appeared to be sleeping, but the small hole in his temple and the pistol in his hand told a different story. A note lay on the desk, written in Torrens' precise hand. "I built an empire in this desert only to watch it crumble because of a $35 ranch and an old man's conscience. The irony is not lost on me. To those I wronged, you have won. To those who served me, you were well paid. I choose my own end rather than dance on a rope for the amusement of lesser men." It was signed with a flourish, even in death, Torrens maintaining his arrogance. "Coward," Rosa said quietly. "He couldn't face justice." "He faced it in his own way," Caleb replied, feeling oddly empty. He'd wanted to see Torrens hang, wanted that closure. This felt unfinished, anticlimactic. Anna picked up a photograph from the desk, Torrens as a young man standing with a beautiful woman and 2 children. "His family," Major Harrison said, "they died of cholera 15 years ago. Some say that's when he changed, became the monster we knew." "Loss is no excuse for evil," Maria said firmly, and no one disagreed. They spent the night cataloging evidence, finding more proof of Torrens' crimes than they could have imagined. Hidden ledgers detailed bribes to officials as far away as Washington. Maps showed where he'd cached stolen weapons. Lists named every man he'd had killed, including Caleb's family. As dawn broke, Caleb stood on the ranch house porch, watching the sun paint the desert gold. Rosa joined him, her arm in a sling but moving steadier. "It's over," she said. "Is it?" Caleb asked. "Torrens is dead, but your husband is still gone. My family is still gone. Maria may never walk properly again. What did we really win?" Rosa was quiet for a moment. "We won the truth," she said finally. "My husband's name will be cleared. He died refusing to murder innocents. Your family's deaths will be recorded correctly. Victims of greed, not random violence. And Anna," she smiled slightly, "Anna has a future now, not just a past." She was right, Caleb realized. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined during those long years of hunting Vasquez, but perhaps it was the ending he needed. The week following Torrens' death should have brought peace, but Caleb knew better. Evil men rarely worked alone, and Torrens had built an empire that wouldn't crumble overnight. As he sat in the sheriff's office in Prescott, Bolton was in jail awaiting trial. Reports came in that proved his suspicions correct. 14 of Torrance's top gunmen are unaccounted for. Major Harrison reported spreading a map across the desk. Led by a man named Dutch Kruger. You know him. Caleb knew him. Kruger had been Torrance's enforcer before McKenna, a former Prussian soldier who'd brought European military tactics to frontier violence. He was smart, ruthless, and completely without conscience. He won't just disappear, Caleb said. Torrance owed him money, promised him land. He'll come to collect. From who? Torrance is dead. From us, Rosa said from the doorway. She'd refused to stay in bed despite the doctor's orders. We have what he'll see as rightfully his, the evidence, the knowledge of where Torrance hid his wealth, and most importantly, we're witnesses to his crimes. Thomas Morrison entered dust-covered from hard riding. My scouts report a large group of riders camped at Skeleton Canyon, about 40 miles south. Could be Kruger. Could be, Caleb agreed. Or could be Comancheros, or Mexican bandits, or any number of problems. Only one way to find out, Thomas said. Major Harrison shook his head. My orders are to maintain order in Prescott until the federal judge arrives. I can't go chasing shadows. Then I will, Caleb said. You're one man with a badge that technically isn't even yours, Harrison pointed out. He's not alone, Rosa said. My husband had friends among the Apache. Real Apache, not Torrance's hired killers. They hate Kruger as much as anyone he led raids on their villages blamed them for it. How many fighters? Caleb asked. Maybe 20. Good men, experienced warriors. Anna spoke up from where she'd been studying her father's journal. There's something else. Papa wrote about a cache of weapons Torrance hid in the mountains. Military-grade rifles, ammunition, even dynamite. He was planning to sell them to revolutionaries in Mexico. If Kruger gets those weapons... Thomas didn't need to finish the thought. Caleb made a decision. Rosa, can you get word to these Apache friends? Already sent my cousin Miguel. They'll meet us at Willow Creek in 2 days. Thomas, gather what men you can trust. We'll need every gun we can get. What about me? Anna asked. You stay here where it's safe, Caleb said automatically. The look she gave him could have melted iron. Safe like my mother was safe when Torrance's men came, like your daughter was safe. The words stung because they were true. Nowhere was truly safe, not in this territory, not with men like Kruger loose. She's proven she can fight, Maria said from her wheelchair. The doctor said she might walk again, but it would take months of healing. Let her choose her own path. Caleb looked at Anna, so young, but aged beyond her years by loss and survival. Your choice, he said finally. Then I'm coming. 2 days later, they assembled at Willow Creek Ranch. The place looked different now. The burned barn had been cleared away, the house temporarily repaired. It was becoming what Caleb had originally sought, a place to rest. But not yet. The Apache arrived as promised, 22 warriors led by a stern-faced man named Joseph Hawk. He was about 40, with intelligent eyes and the bearing of a natural leader. Rosa Vasquez, he greeted formally. Your husband saved my son's life once. I pay that debt now. This isn't just about debt, Rosa replied. Kruger has killed your people too. Yes, Hawk agreed, which is why we'll fight, but understand we fight our way. No white man's rules, no honorable combat. We fight to win. That's the only way I know, Caleb said. They spent the day planning. The weapons cache was hidden in Devil's Canyon, a box canyon with only one entrance. It was a perfect defensive position, but also a perfect trap. Kruger will expect us to come, Thomas pointed out. He'll be ready. Then we don't come the way he expects, Hawk said. He traced a line on the map. There's an old Apache trail over the mountains. Difficult, dangerous, but it comes out above the canyon. Small group could rappel down attack from above while main force hits the entrance. Divide our forces. Thomas was skeptical. That's risky. Everything's risky now, Caleb said. But surprise is our only advantage. That night, as they prepared weapons and supplies, Caleb found himself sitting with Rosa by the fire. She was sharpening a knife with methodical strokes, the firelight dancing on her face. Why help us? He asked. You could take Anna and disappear, start over somewhere safe. There is no safe, she replied. Not while men like Kruger live. Besides, she looked at him directly, you saved our lives. Apache honor demands we repay that. Joaquin would have killed me if Torrance had ordered it. Yes, she agreed simply, but he would have hated himself for it. That's the difference between him and Kruger. Joaquin had a conscience, even if he didn't always listen to it. Anna approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd changed from her torn dress into practical pants and shirt, her hair tied back. She looked older, harder, more like her adoptive father than the frightened girl Caleb had cut down from the hanging post. "Mr. Morrison's been teaching me to shoot better," she said. "He's a good teacher." "He's a good man," Rosa observed, noting the slight blush on Anna's cheeks. "I'm not looking for a husband," Anna said quickly. "No one said you were," Caleb replied. "But when this is over, you'll need to decide what kind of life you want." "When this is over," Anna repeated softly. "Do you really think it will ever be over? Men like Torrens, like Kruger, aren't there always more?" It was a question Caleb had asked himself many times over his years as a marshal. "There are always more," he admitted, "but there are also always people willing to stand against them. That's what makes the difference." They moved out before dawn, taking separate routes to avoid detection. Caleb led the mountain group himself, Rosa, Anna, and 6 Apache warriors. Thomas commanded the main force that would assault the canyon entrance as a distraction. The trail Hawk had described was worse than difficult. It was nearly impossible. They had to dismount and lead the horses up slopes of loose shale that crumbled under their feet. One wrong step meant a fall of hundreds of feet. Anna never complained, though Caleb could see the strain in her face. When her horse balked at a particularly treacherous section, she calmly blindfolded it and led it across, whispering soothing words in Apache. "Where did you learn that?" Caleb asked. "Joaquin taught me. He said horses are like people, they're braver when they can't see the danger." It took them all day to reach the overlook above Devil's Canyon. As the sun set, they could see Kruger's camp below, 30 men well-armed, positioned to repel any attack from the canyon entrance. The weapons cache was in a cave halfway up the canyon wall, accessible only by a narrow ledge. "They fortified well," Rosa observed. "Thomas's force will be slaughtered if they attack head-on." "That's why we go in first," Caleb said. "Take out their sentries, create chaos, then signal Thomas." One of the Apache warriors, a young man named Samuel, had been scouting ahead. He returned with troubling news. "There's something else. Prisoners. They have 5 women in a cage near the cave." Caleb's jaw tightened. Using human shields was exactly Kruger's style. "Local women?" Rosa asked. "Mexican, I think. Probably grabbed from a village across the border." This complicated things. They couldn't use dynamite or wholesale tactics with innocents in the way. "We adapt," Caleb decided. "Anna, you and 2 warriors free the prisoners. Rosa and I will go for the weapons cache. The rest create a diversion." "That's not enough people," Rosa protested. "It'll have to be." They rappelled down in full darkness using ropes the Apache had woven from yucca fibers, strong but nearly invisible against the rock. Caleb went first, his boots finding purchase on the canyon wall with practiced ease. 25 years of law work had included its share of climbing into and out of trouble. The first century never saw him coming. Caleb's knife was silent, efficient. He caught the body before it could fall, easing it behind a boulder. Rosa took the second guard with an arrow, the traditional Apache weapon, making no sound. They reached the ledge leading to the weapons cache. 2 guards stood at the cave entrance, playing cards by lantern light. Careless. Kruger would have shot them for such laxity if he'd known. Rosa knocked another arrow, but Caleb stopped her. The bodies would be visible from below. Instead, he picked up a pebble, tossed it past the guards. When they turned to investigate, he and Rosa rushed them. A brief struggle muffled by hands over mouths, and both guards were down. Inside the cave, crates were stacked to the ceiling. Caleb pried one open, brand-new Spencer, repeating rifles still coated in factory grease. Another held ammunition, another dynamite, enough weapons to outfit a small army. "We can't let Kruger have these," Rosa said. "We won't." Caleb began setting dynamite charges. "Once Anna frees those prisoners, we blow the whole cache." A woman's scream echoed through the canyon. Caleb and Rosa rushed to the cave mouth. Below, chaos had erupted. Anna and her team had reached the prisoner cage, but they'd been spotted. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions. "Too early," Rosa cursed. "Thomas isn't in position yet." Caleb could see Anna pinned down behind a wagon and return fire coming from all directions. One of the Apache warriors with her was already down. The prisoners were screaming, pressing against their cage bars. Without thinking, Caleb grabbed one of the Spencer rifles, loaded it, and began firing into Kruger's men. The repeating rifle's rapid fire caught them off guard, forcing them to seek cover. "Signal Thomas," he shouted to Rosa. Oh, she lit a torch, waved it in the predetermined pattern. Moments later, an answering light flashed from the canyon entrance. Then came the thunder of horses as Thomas led the charge. The battle turned into a melee. Kruger's men, caught between forces, fought desperately. Caleb saw Dutch Kruger himself, recognizable by his Prussian helmet, rallying his men near the center of camp. Anna had managed to break the lock on the cage, freeing the prisoners. But as they ran, one stumbled and fell. Anna turned back for her, directly into the line of fire. Caleb saw the gunman drawing a bead on Anna, too far for him to intervene. Then Thomas Morrison appeared, throwing himself between Anna and the shooter. The bullet meant for Anna caught Thomas in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Anna's scream of rage was audible even over the gunfire. She grabbed Thomas's rifle and shot his attacker, then began dragging Thomas to cover. "Time to go," Rosa said urgently. "Light the fuses." Caleb lit the dynamite charges, then he and Rosa rappelled down to the canyon floor. The battle was turning in their favor. Kruger's men were outnumbered now that Hawk's full force had arrived. "Everybody out," Caleb shouted. "The cave's going to blow." The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. The entire cliff face seemed to erupt, tons of rock and weaponry cascading into the canyon. The shockwave knocked everyone flat. When the dust cleared, Dick Kruger and 8 of his men were still standing surrounded. The Prussian looked around, calculating odds, then threw down his rifle. "I surrender," he said in accented English. "I demand treatment as prisoner of war." "You're not a soldier," Caleb said, approaching with his gun drawn. "You're a murderer and a thief." Kruger smiled coldly. "So was Vasquez. So was every man here who's killed for money or land. Don't pretend moral superiority, Marshal." Before Caleb could respond, one of the freed prisoners, a young Mexican woman, picked up a fallen pistol. "You killed my husband," she said to Kruger in Spanish. "You burned our village." "Maria, no," one of the other women cried, but it was too late. The gun fired, and Kruger fell, clutching his stomach. The woman dropped the gun, her hands shaking. "Now we are even," she said, then walked away. Kruger's remaining men surrendered without further fight. As Caleb organized their transport back to Prescott, he found Anna kneeling beside Thomas, who was conscious but pale from blood loss. "The bullet went through clean," she was saying. "You'll be fine." "Worth it," Thomas managed, attempting a smile. "Couldn't let anything happen to you." Anna's eyes were wet. "You stupid, brave fool, don't you ever do that again." "Can't promise that," Thomas said. "Seems like trouble follows you around." "Then maybe you should follow someone else." "Not a chance." Back in Prescott, the wounded were tended and the prisoners jailed. The destruction of the weapons cache and capture of Kruger's gang marked the end of organized resistance from Torrance's empire. But as Caleb sat in the sheriff's office reviewing reports, he knew one threat remained. "Judge Brennan arrives tomorrow," Major Harrison informed him. "He'll want all the evidence properly documented." "It's ready," Caleb assured him. Crawford miraculously had survived his wounds and was recovering at Fort Huachuca. He'd sent word that Caleb should retain the marshal's badge until a proper replacement could be found. That night, a stranger arrived in town. He was well-dressed, Eastern-looking, with the soft hands of a businessman. He presented himself at the sheriff's office, asking for Marshal Stone. "My name is Randolph Torrance," he said. "Samuel was my brother." Caleb's hand went to his gun, but the man raised his hands peacefully. "I'm not here for revenge," Randolph said quickly. "I'm here to make amends, if such a thing is possible." "Your brother killed my family," Caleb said coldly. "I know. I've read the documents. I've also read the letters he sent me over the years, growing increasingly paranoid and violent. I tried to convince him to come east to leave this territory, but he refused." Randolph pulled out a leather portfolio. "I'm executor of his estate. I want to make restitution to his victims." The portfolio contained bank drafts, property deeds, and a detailed accounting of Torrance's wealth. It was worth over $2 million. "Blood money," Rosa said. She'd been listening from the doorway. "Yes," Randolph agreed, "but it can do some good now. Build schools, hospitals, help the families he destroyed." Caleb studied the man, looking for deception. He found only weariness and shame. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I'm leaving," Randolph said. "I'm going back east tonight. I never want to see this territory again. All I ask is that you use the money wisely and that my brother's sins don't follow my children." After Randolph left, Caleb, Rosa, and Anna sat in the office discussing what to do with Torrance's fortune. "The Apache tribes should get a share," Rosa said. "They suffered the most." And the Mexican villages he raided, Anna added. Those women we freed have nothing to go back to. Set up a trust, Caleb suggested. Have Judge Brennan oversee it, make sure the money goes where it's needed. They worked through the night, creating a plan for distributing the wealth. As dawn broke, Caleb realized this was what justice really looked like, not just punishing the guilty, but helping the innocent rebuild. Judge Brennan arrived at noon, escorted by a full cavalry troop. He was younger than Caleb expected, perhaps 40, with keen eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Marshal Stone, he greeted. I've read the reports. Quite a story. All documented, Your Honor. Good. We'll need ironclad cases. The whole territory is watching. He paused. I understand there's some question about pardons for the Vasquez family. They were victims, not criminals, Caleb said firmly. That's for the court to decide. But given their cooperation and the circumstances, Brennan smiled slightly. I'm inclined to be lenient. The trials began 3 days later. They were swift but fair. Bolton and the surviving members of Kruger's gang were convicted and sentenced to prison. The evidence against Torrens was entered into record, officially clearing Joaquin Vasquez of many crimes attributed to him. When Rosa took the stand, she spoke clearly and, without emotion, detailing years of persecution and violence. When asked about her husband's crimes, she didn't deny them. He was a flawed man who made terrible choices, she said, but in the end he chose to stop. That's why Torrens killed him. Anna testified about her father, Judge Bennett, and how Torrens had ordered his murder. Her testimony was so powerful that several jury members wept. Thomas Morrison, his arms still in a sling, testified about the attack on the mission. When asked why he'd risked his life for strangers, he looked directly at Anna. They weren't strangers. They were people in need. That's all the reason required. When it was over, justice had been served as well as it could be. The dead couldn't be brought back, but the truth was known, and the living could begin to heal. 6 months had passed since the trials. Prescott had settled into an uneasy peace, but Caleb Stone couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. He stood on the porch of the sheriff's office. He'd been officially appointed interim sheriff until elections, watching the sun set over the desert. The telegram in his pocket changed everything. Crawford dead. Stop. Final message follows. Stop. Luke Hammond alive. Stop. Coming for you. Stop. Luke Hammond. The name sent ice through Caleb's veins. He'd been Torrens' bookkeeper, the one who'd betrayed them at the mission. Anna had shot him during the battle, or so they'd thought. Bad news, Rosa asked, stepping onto the porch. She'd stayed in town helping establish a school for Apache and Mexican children with Torrens' money. Caleb handed her the telegram. Her face darkened as she read. We need to warn Anna and Thomas. The young couple had married 3 months ago, a ceremony that brought together Apache, Mexican, and Anglo communities in rare harmony. They were building a life on a small ranch outside town, trying to leave violence behind. Saddle the horses, Caleb said. We ride tonight. They reached the Morrison Ranch after midnight, but they were too late. The house was dark, the front door hanging open. Caleb entered with his gun drawn, Rosa covering him. The main room was destroyed furniture, overturned blood on the floor, but no bodies. They're alive, Rosa said, reading the signs with a tracker's eye. Taken, not killed. A paper was pinned to the wall with a knife. Caleb's hands were steady as he read it aloud. Stone, you took everything from me. My employer, my future, my face. The girl shot me and left me for dead, but hate is stronger than bullets. Come to Willow Creek Ranch at dawn. Come alone. If I see anyone else, they die slowly. You have 6 hours, Hammond. Your ranch, Rosa said. He's brought this full circle. My fight, my responsibility. Our fight, Rosa corrected. Anna is my family. Thomas saved her life. We go together. He said alone, he's expecting you to follow his rules. When has that ever worked? Rosa's eyes were fierce. Besides, you'll need a backup. Hammond wouldn't face you alone. He's a coward and a bookkeeper, not a gunfighter. She was right. Caleb had learned long ago that walking into a trap was sometimes necessary, but walking in blind was just stupid. They reached Willow Creek Ranch as the eastern sky began to lighten. The place looked abandoned again, but Caleb knew better. He could feel eyes watching from the windows. I'm here, Hammond, he called out. Luke Hammond stepped onto the porch, and Caleb had to suppress a gasp. The left side of the man's face was destroyed. Anna's bullet had taken his eye and cheek, leaving a massive scar tissue. He looked like something from a nightmare. Marshal Stone, Hammond said, his voice distorted by his injuries. Or is it Sheriff now? So many titles for a failure. Where are they? Safe for now. Hammond gestured and two men brought Thomas and Anna out. They were tied, gagged, but appeared unharmed. The happy couple, young love. Reminds me of your daughter Stone. Emily wasn't it. She was young and in love too before Vasquez got to her. Caleb's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice level. What do you want? Justice, Hammond said. You destroyed everything. Torrance was going to make me rich, give me power. Now he's dead and I'm a monster. He touched his ruined face. So here's my justice. You watch them die like you watched your family die. Then you live with it like I live with this face. Your quarrel is with me. Let them go. Hammond laughed an ugly sound. My quarrel is with all of you. The Apache bitch who harbored Vasquez. The girl who shot me. The boy who helped you, all guilty. More men emerged from the house, 6 of them all armed. Caleb recognized some as former Torrance men who'd escaped the trials. 7 against 1, Caleb observed. About what I'd expect from you. 8, a new voice said. Joseph Hawk stepped out from behind the barn, but something was wrong. His rifle was pointed at Caleb, not Hammond. Hawk, Rosa said, stepping into view despite Caleb's plan for her to stay hidden. What are you doing? Surviving, Hawk replied. Hammond promised my people will be left alone if I help him. No more raids, no more persecution. You believe him? Rosa asked incredulously. I believe in protecting my tribe. The whites will never accept us. At least this way some of us live. Hammond smiled with the good side of his face. See, Stone, everyone has a price, even noble Apache warriors. But Caleb was watching Hawk's eyes and he saw something Hammond didn't, a flicker of movement, a subtle shift of the rifle. You're right, Caleb said loudly. Everyone does have a price. What was yours, Hammond? 30 pieces of silver. Don't compare me to Hawk's rifle swung toward Hammond's men and fired. The shot was a signal. Apache warriors materialized from concealment, opening fire on Hammond's group. Rosa rolled behind a water trough, her pistol barking. Caleb dove forward, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. The gunfight was brief but vicious. Hammond's men, caught completely off guard, fell quickly. Hammond himself stumbled backward, clutching a shoulder wound, and disappeared into the house. Caleb rushed to Anna and Thomas, cutting their bonds. Are you hurt? No, Thomas gasped, pulling the gag free. It was a trap, but not the one Hammond thought. Hawk was never really with him. My idea, Anna added, rubbing her wrists. Hawk approached us yesterday, said Hammond had contacted him. We set this up. You used yourselves as bait. We knew you'd come, Anna said simply, and we knew you'd need an edge. A shot rang out from the house and splinters exploded from the post next to Caleb's head. Hammond was still alive, still dangerous. He's barricaded in there, Hawk reported. 2 men with him. Burn him out, one of the Apache suggested. No, Caleb said. That's my house. I bought it fair and square for $35, and I'll be damned if I let Luke Hammond take that from me, too. He looked at the house, remembering the first time he'd seen it. The place where he'd found 3 women hanging, where everything had started. Besides, he added, I want to look him in the eye when I arrest him. Or kill him, Rosa said. No, he stands trial. That's what separates us from them. We follow the law, even when it's hard. Caleb approached the house, calling out, Hammond, it's over. Your men are dead or captured. Surrender now and you'll get a fair trial. Fair, Hammond laughed bitterly from inside. Was it fair when that bitch shot my face off? Was it fair when Torrance died without paying me what I was owed? Life isn't fair, Caleb replied. But justice can be. Give up Hammond. Don't make this worse. Worse? How could it be worse? The front door burst open and Hammond charged out, a pistol in each hand, firing wildly. He was screaming, incoherent with rage and pain. Caleb stood his ground, aimed carefully, and fired once. Hammond stumbled, looked down at the growing red stain on his chest, then collapsed. He was still alive when Caleb reached him, but fading fast. Not fair, he whispered. No, Caleb agreed. It never is. Hammond died with his eyes open, staring at the dawn sky. The aftermath of Hammond's attack brought unexpected consequences. Word spread that Apache warriors had fought alongside whites to defeat a common enemy. Some saw it as hope for peace. Others saw it as Apache aggression. 3 days later, a mob formed in Prescott. "Those savages attacked white men," shouted Carl Brennan. No relation to the judge, a miner who'd lost a brother to Apache raids years ago. Now they're in our town, our shops, acting like they belonged. Caleb stood on the sheriff's office steps, facing down 50 angry men. They fought criminals, not innocent whites. They helped bring justice. "Apache justice isn't our justice," someone yelled. "Justice is justice," Caleb replied firmly. "And any man who tries to take the law into his own hands will answer to me." The mob grumbled but dispersed. Caleb knew it was temporary. Fear and hatred ran too deep to disappear overnight. That evening, Major Harrison visited the office. "You've got a problem, Stone. Washington's received complaints. They want the Apache relocated to the reservation immediately." "That's not right. They've done nothing wrong." "Since when has that mattered?" Harrison's face was grim. "I have orders. If they're not on the reservation in a week, I'm to force the issue." After Harrison left, Caleb found Rosa, Anna, and Thomas in the schoolhouse. Joseph Hawk was there too, along with several Apache families who'd come to town for safety after threats from local ranchers. "We heard," Hawk said simply. "We'll go. It's better than fighting." "No," Anna said fiercely. "You helped us. We should help you." "How?" Hawk asked. "The Army has spoken." "The Army enforces the law," Caleb said slowly, an idea forming. "But the law can be interpreted different ways." He pulled out a law book, flipping through pages he'd memorized years ago. "Hear the Homestead Act. Any citizen can claim 160 acres of public land if they improve it." "We're not citizens," Hawk pointed out. "But Anna is," Caleb said, "and as her husband Thomas is. They can claim land, and Apache can live on it as their employees." "That's bending the law pretty far," Thomas said. "It's using the law as it was written," Caleb corrected. "Maybe not as it was intended, but legally sound." Rosa smiled. "Torrens's money could purchase additional land, create a trust. A permanent settlement, legal and protected." "You do this for us?" Hawk asked. "You stood with us," Anna said. "Family stands together." They worked through the night preparing legal documents. Judge Brennan, when consulted, raised an eyebrow, but agreed the plan was technically legal. "You're going to make enemies," he warned Caleb. "I've been doing that for 25 years. Haven't stopped yet." The next morning, Caleb filed the papers. Anna and Thomas claimed 160 acres adjacent to Willow Creek Ranch. Rosa, as a Mexican citizen who'd married an American, even a dead outlaw counted, claimed another 160. Using Torrens's money, they purchased an additional 500 acres from willing sellers. Over 800 acres, Thomas calculated. Enough for 50 families to live and farm. Carl Brennan's mob returned that afternoon, larger and angrier. "You're harboring hostiles," Brennan shouted. "We won't stand for it." "They're legally employed agricultural workers," Caleb replied calmly. "Any violence against them is a federal crime. Your badge won't protect you forever, Stone. It doesn't have to, just long enough for people to see the truth that we can live together peacefully." That night, shots were fired at the schoolhouse. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. The next morning, Caleb found a note under his door. "Leave town or burn with the savages." He showed it to Rosa. "They're escalating." "Let them come," she said, checking her rifle. But when they came, it wasn't with guns. Carl Brennan had hired a lawyer from Tucson challenging the land claims in court. The Apache, he argued, were foreign nationals illegally occupying American soil. Judge Brennan, still no relation despite the shared surname, presided over the hearing. The courtroom was packed, tensions high. The lawyer, a smooth talker named Pemberton, argued eloquently about property rights and the dangers of savage Indians living near civilized towns. Caleb, acting as legal representative for Anna and Thomas, countered with facts. "These Apache fought against criminals who threatened our entire community. They've broken no laws. They're working the land, paying taxes, sending their children to school. What more do you want?" "We want them gone," someone shouted from the gallery. Judge Brennan gavelled for order. "I'll render my decision tomorrow." That night, the Apache settlement was attacked. Riders with torches tried to burn the buildings, but Hawk's warriors were ready. The firefight was brief but intense. When it ended, 3 attackers were dead, 5 wounded. Caleb arrived with a posse to find Carl Brennan among the wounded. "You're under arrest," Caleb told him. "For what? Defending our town from savages. For attempted murder, arson, and violation of federal law." Caleb hauled him to his feet. "You just attacked American citizens on their own property." Judge Brennan's courtroom was standing room only the next morning. The attack had polarized the town. Some supported the Apache's right to defend themselves. Others saw it as proof they were dangerous. "Before I render my decision on the land dispute," the judge began, "we must address last night's violence." Carl Brennan, bandaged and angry, stood accused of leading the attack. His lawyer argued self-defense, claiming the Apache had fired first. Joseph Hawk testified otherwise. "We watched them come with torches. We warned them to leave. They attacked. We defended." Anna took the stand next. "These men came to burn us out, maybe kill us because of hatred and fear. How is that different from what Torrens did?" "Torrens was a criminal," Carl Brennan shouted. "So are you," Anna replied calmly. "You just hide behind prettier words." Judge Brennan gavelled for order. "I've heard enough. Carl Brennan, you're found guilty of attempted arson and inciting violence. 6 months in prison." The crowd erupted, half cheered, half booed. "As for the land dispute," the judge continued, raising his voice over the noise, "the claims are legal and valid. The Apache residents are legally employed and have broken no laws. Case dismissed." "This isn't over," someone shouted. They were more right than they knew. That afternoon, riders arrived from Fort Huachuca with urgent news. A large band of Comancheros, over 100 strong, was moving north from Mexico. They'd already hit 2 settlements, leaving no survivors. Major Harrison assembled the town leaders. "We need every fighting man available. These aren't ordinary raiders, they're military trained, well armed." "What about the Apache?" someone asked. "Will they fight?" All eyes turned to Joseph Hawk. "Against Comancheros," Hawk smiled grimly. "They've been our enemies for generations. We'll fight." For the first time, Apache and white settlers would fight side by side as official allies. The Comancheros hit at dawn 3 days later, but the town was ready. Caleb had organized the defense using his decades of experience. Apache warriors held the high ground, their knowledge of terrain invaluable. White settlers manned barricades in the streets. Mexican vaqueros, led by Rosa, guarded the flanks. The battle was fierce. The Comancheros had modern rifles, military tactics, but they hadn't expected unified resistance. Apache arrows found gaps in their lines. Settler rifles punched holes in their charges. Rosa's vaqueros hit their flanks hard, driving them back. In the midst of the battle, Caleb saw Carl Brennan released to fight, save an Apache child from a Comanchero's blade. The racist miner didn't hesitate, putting himself between the child and danger, taking a bullet in the process. When the Comancheros finally retreated, leaving 40 dead, the town had lost 12 defenders, Apache, Mexican, and white alike. They were buried together in the town cemetery, a first in Prescott's history. Carl Brennan survived his wound. As he recovered the Apache child he'd saved, a girl named Morning Star visited him daily, bringing him water and food. "Why?" he asked her one day. "You saved me," she replied simply. "Now I save you." Something in Carl's eyes changed that day. The hatred that had burned there for years began to fade. Epilogue. The last sunset. 1 year later, Caleb Stone stood on the porch of Willow Creek Ranch, watching the sun set over land that had cost him $35 and nearly everything else. The ranch had grown. What started as a desperate purchase had become a thriving community. Apache, Mexican, and white families worked the land together. Children played without regard for the color of their skin. It wasn't perfect. Prejudice died hard, but it was progress. Anna and Thomas approached Anna carrying their newborn son. They'd named him Samuel Crawford Morrison, after the old marshal who died 6 months ago, finally succumbing to his wounds but living long enough to see the peace he'd fought for. "Letter from Washington," Thomas said, handing Caleb an official envelope. Caleb read it, then read it again. "They're offering me the position of territorial marshal, full federal authority." "Will you take it?" Anna asked. Caleb looked at the badge Crawford had given him, worn now from daily use. "I'm 69 years old. I should be sitting in a rocking chair telling lies about my youth." "But," Rosa said, joining them, she'd been teaching at the school, her strength and wisdom invaluable to the community. "But there's still work to do, still wrongs to right." "Then do it," Rosa said simply, "but not alone. We've proven that together we're stronger than apart. Joseph Hawk approached leading a horse. If you're going to be territorial marshal, you'll need deputies. I volunteer. An Apache federal deputy. Caleb smiled. That'll rustle some feathers in Washington. Good, Hawk replied. Feathers need rustling sometimes. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, Caleb made his decision. All right, but we do this right, by the law with justice for all. Justice for all, Anna repeated, looking at her son. That's a world worth building. Carl Brennan approached, walking slowly with a cane. Morningstar walked beside him, having become his unofficial adopted daughter after her parents were killed in the Comanchero raid. Sheriff Stone, he said formally. Marshal Stone, I mean. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. About the Apache, about you, about everything. We all make mistakes, Caleb replied. What matters is learning from them. I'd like to help if you'll have me. I know mining law property disputes could be useful for a marshal's office. Caleb extended his hand. Welcome aboard. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit throughout the settlement. Music drifted from the main house, a mixture of Apache drums, Mexican guitars, and an Irish fiddle someone had produced. People danced, laughed, shared food and stories. Margaret and Emily would have loved this, Caleb thought. They'd always believed in the goodness of people, even when he doubted. They'd be proud, Rosa said quietly, seeming to read his thoughts. I hope so. I know so. You took the worst thing that could happen, losing them, and turned it into something good. This community, this peace, it's their legacy as much as yours. Anna approached with the baby. Uncle Caleb, would you hold Samuel for a moment? Caleb took the infant, carefully looking down at the small face. The boy had his mother's Apache features and his father's blue eyes, a living bridge between worlds. What kind of world will he grow up in? Thomas wondered aloud. A better one than we did, Caleb said firmly. We'll make sure of it. As he stood there surrounded by former enemies who'd become family, Caleb reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. A $35 ranch, 3 women hanging from ropes, a fight against corruption and hatred that had seemed impossible to win. But they'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to matter. Enough to prove that change was possible, that justice could prevail, that people could learn to see past their differences. Thank you, Anna said suddenly. For what? For cutting us down that day, for choosing to help instead of walking away. It wasn't a choice, Caleb replied. A man sees someone in need, he helps. That's all there is to it. No, Rosa disagreed. There's always a choice. You chose correctly. The baby gurgled in Caleb's arms, tiny fingers wrapping around his weathered thumb. Such small hands to inherit such a large responsibility, keeping the peace they'd fought to build. But looking around at the gathered community, Apache warriors teaching white children to track Mexican women, sharing recipes with former enemies, Carl Brennan laughing at something Morningstar had said, Caleb felt hope. The West was changing. It would take time, probably generations, but the seeds were planted. Here in this unlikely place, bought for $35 and paid for in blood and tears, something new was growing. Time for bed, little one, Anna said, taking Samuel back. As the gathering slowly dispersed, people heading to their homes, Caleb remained on the porch. Rosa stayed with him, comfortable in shared silence. Do you regret it? She asked finally. Everything that's happened. Caleb thought about it. The pain of loss would never fully fade. Margaret and Emily's absence would always ache. But their deaths had led him here to this moment, to this purpose. I regret the cost, he said, but not the outcome. That's all any of us can say. In the distance, a coyote howled and another answered. The eternal conversation of the desert unchanged by human struggles. The land didn't care about Apache or white Mexican or American. It just endured, waiting for rain, surviving. Like us, Caleb thought, we endure, we survive. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very stubborn, we prevail. The moon rose full and bright, washing the desert in silver light. Somewhere a guitar played a soft melody. A baby cried and was quickly soothed. Dogs barked. Life went on. $35, Caleb murmured. The best investment you ever made, Rosa replied. No, Caleb corrected, looking at the community they'd built, the peace they'd achieved, the future they'd secured. The best investment was choosing to care. Everything else followed from that. As they stood there, two old warriors who'd found peace at last, the desert wind carried the sounds of the settlement, laughter, music, life. It was the sound of hope, of futures being written, of wounds slowly healing. And in that moment, Caleb Stone knew that Margaret and Emily were at peace too. Their deaths had not been in vain. From their tragedy had grown something beautiful, something lasting. Justice, community, family, all for the price of $35 and the courage to do what was right.